So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. Two strong earthquakes rattled southeastern Korea on Monday, triggering concerns about nuclear power plant safety and disruptions to production facilities. South Korean markets seem to be getting more immune to recent North Korean provocations, with Pyongyang's latest nuclear test having a limited impact on the benchmark cost base. We'll sit down with an expert for a closer look. Korea was shaken by two major earthquakes Monday night, with the epicenter being near the city of Gyeongju, not far from the industrial town of Ulsan. And while quakes resulted in a temporary suspension of operations for some factories, we haven't heard of any reports yet of serious casualties or damages. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
It was the largest earthquake on record in Korea. A record magnitude 5.8 tremor rattled the city of Gyeongju at 8:30 p.m. on Monday on the southeast coast of the country. This was the second tremor that hit the country 50 minutes after an initial 5.1 quake. There have been no reports of serious injuries or damages so far. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, a total of 11 companies temporarily halted production to check for damages after the earthquake, but soon resumed operations Tuesday morning. Among them were Samsung Electronics, which voluntarily suspended its production line in an industrial estate near the epicenter, and with LG Display. Korea's leading oil refiners, SK Innovation and S-Oil, also said that their oil refining petrochemical plants in Ulsan, not far from Gyeongju, sustained little damage from the tremors. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power, the operator of the country's nuclear power plant, said it shut down 4 of its nearby Ulsan reactors in order to carry out thorough safety checks. While it's still unclear when the reactors will go back online, the state-run operators said that none of them were affected and they will be able to safely generate electricity. Shortly after the earthquakes, the government set up an emergency team to handle the aftermath of the tremors and said it will devise support measures for those hit by the recent quakes. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Now, we're seeing some mixed signals from Korea's latest jobs report. Korea added the highest number of new jobs since December, but performance in the manufacturing sector remains slow. Our Hwang Jae has this report.
Korea created 387,000 more jobs last month from a year ago, putting the total number of employed at over 26.5 million. That's the biggest number of jobs added since December last year, when the country created slightly less than 500,000. Statistics Korea data shows that the rise was partly driven by the robust construction sector, buoyed by the recent boom in home transactions. The construction industry alone added 71,000 jobs. But it might be too early to be overly optimistic about the recent jobs figure, as the upturn was mainly led by the low base effect prompted by the MERS outbreak last year. On top of that, jobs growth remained sluggish in manufacturing, with the number of employed dropping by 74,000 on year, marking 2 straight months of decline. The industry continues to suffer from slumbering global demand and the government's ongoing corporate restructuring. A fall in manufacturing jobs in July was the first decrease in more than 4 years. In particular, the country's southern regions like Busan and Gyeongsangnam-do province, where major shipyards are located, saw unemployment rates soar. The government will continue efforts to quickly implement stimulus measures like the extra budget, pledging to roll out 70% of the funds before the upcoming major holiday Chuseok, which begins on Wednesday. Hwang Jae, Business Daily.
Korea is doing fairly well when it comes to implementing its comprehensive growth strategies laid out within the framework of the G20 to overcome low growth. According to a joint analysis conducted by the IMF and OECD, Seoul has so far put 96% of its policy commitments into action. Now, that's roughly 40 percentage points higher than the G20 average, which is just at 55%. Among the 26 major pledges, all but 25 have been completed, with the exception being labor reform bills, which are still pending at the National Assembly. The report also projected Korea's GDP would grow as much as $38 billion between 2014 to 2018 by executing these growth strategies. That's about 3.1% of the country's projected GDP in 2018. And a fresh report from the nation's central bank shows export prices in August fell to the lowest level on a Korean won basis in more than 3 decades due to a stronger local currency. In a second straight month of decline, the export price index came in nearly 2% lower from July, with the won gaining 2.3% against the greenback. Those trading on currency forward contracts saw their export prices rise by 0.8%. And over a 12-month period, the export index has nosedived by nearly 10%. Are South Korean markets safe from North Korea's provocations? Back in 2011, when North Korea's then leader Kim Jong-il died, that news caused the South Korean stock and forex markets to stumble. But the impact from Pyongyang's latest nuclear test was relatively contained, showing a shift in investor sentiment. Take a look.
North Korea rattled the world on Friday, carrying out its 5th and largest to date nuclear test. Combined with soured sentiment from ECB's inaction on Thursday, South Korea's benchmark Kospi closed 1.25% lower that day. On Monday, shares slid even further, falling below the key 2,000 mark during trading for the first time in a month and closing down nearly 2.3%. Experts say that much of the decline was from weakened investor enthusiasm over the recent Samsung debacle and jitters about a looming rate hike from the U.S. Federal Reserve rather than from North Korea's latest provocation. The impact from north of the border looks to be limited for now, but Seoul officials say they will be on alert for possible future provocations, as well as the effects it may have on the South Korean economy.
And for more on this, Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so South Korean shares plunged even farther on Monday following North Korea's nuke test back in last Friday. But then a lot of it was attributed to disappointment coming from the ECB. So how much of a role or part do you think North Korea's nuke test played in plunging Kospi?
Okay, I think very little. Kospi fell by 2.28%. Kosdaq fell by 1.82% on Monday, but so did most other international markets. The European markets fell and the Japanese markets fell. And I think that's because a lot of people were disappointed that ECB and Bank of Japan did not commit themselves to further lowering the rates or continuing or expanding their QE policy. So most of the shock can be accounted for by what's happening in the global markets. Now, if we look at the past couple of North Korean nuclear tests, it really didn't affect the market at all.
Okay.
So I think that's another additional reason why we don't really see a lot of North Korean specific effects in the stock markets.
Well, going back to what you just mentioned a little bit, I mean, was there any time back when North Korea conducted its nuclear test that it affected a lot the Korean financial market?
Well, the first test, when we had the first nuclear test back in 2006, the markets fell by 2.41%. But then since afterwards, it's only been falling by 0.2 or 0.26%. So after the first test, when everybody was nervous, they found that the markets actually recovered very quickly. And I think that was a learning effect. So every time that they have North Korean provocation, unless usually what happens in North Korean provocation is that they have nuclear test or a bombing, and then they have some rhetoric, and then they go quiet for a while. So as long as they follow follow that pattern, I don't think you're going to see that much change. Now, the only sort of exception that we have to this rule is when Kim Jong-il died in 2011. Then the stock market went down by more than 3%.
Okay.
So it's the surprise which matters. And after that initial surprise, when the market learns what happens, I think any kind of risk is discounted. So unless it's a surprise, it's not going to affect the markets very much.
But then should we be concerned when it comes to South Korean exports and foreign investment?
Okay, well, we talk about Korean discount. North Korean threat, well, it varies by somewhat depending on the international environment and whether North Korean domestic situation changes or not. But still, the threat from North Korea is mostly continuous.
Okay.
So we always face North Korean possibility of a North Korean provocation, and that's, I think, built into the market. We talk about Korean discount a lot, and I think that Korean discount, part of that is due to North Korean possibility of provocation. But it's only the surprises which change that. And I think the statistics for the last few nuclear tests do show that.
So not too much
big changes in investment.
Over. Okay.
Exports, we're definitely going to take a hit on exports this month, but that's probably going to be more from the problems with Hanjin shipping. The exports cannot go out.
Right.
And Samsung Electronics, they have a lot of problems with their new smartphones. So I think that's going to affect it a lot more than the North Korean test.
Now, talking about South Korea's credit ratings, which have hit record highs this year, but could these geopolitical risks bring down those credit ratings again?
Okay, again, I think the more permanent risk, the ongoing continuous risk, has already been built into the prices. So unless North Koreans change their behavior drastically, I don't think the credit rating or the Korean bond risk premium is going to change much. So I don't think this by itself will have any effect on the sovereign credit rating. Now, if North Korea starts acting differently, then they're going to have to reconsider. But so far, they're not acting particularly differently from what they had before. The only thing only surprise this test is that it came so quickly after the last one.
Okay, which the last one was back in January. So after that, countries around the world actually stepped up pressure on North Korea, including, I guess, imposing economic sanctions and all that. But how effective do you think those were?
Okay, I think it's not as effective as it could have been perhaps in the past. One problem is that China, I think, is reluctant to go along with the sanctions because, well, a lot of Western news reports are saying that if they had to choose between a nuclear North Korea and a collapsed North Korea, they would rather choose the nuclear North Korea. So they're always going to let some humanitarian aid go through. And I think North Korea knows that, so it doesn't count on sanctions being complete. And they can continue to use nuclear weapons as a tool to try to get what they want. They may not succeed, but they want to use that as a tool. So with those two factors, I don't think sanctions are becoming very effective.
No, well, looking ahead, it's quite possible that North Korea might conduct another nuclear test in the near future or far future. So what other risks remain that could affect Korea's financial markets as well as the economy as a whole? Okay,
well, if you're talking about North Korea specifically, I think further nuclear tests may not affect the markets very much. The exception I would make to that is if they do develop a missile which can reach mainland U.S., then then it will depend a lot on the U.S. response. Other than that, if North Korea starts acting very differently from what they did in the past, again, that would make things more unstable. That would affect the investment and trade. But other than that, I think it has to do more with domestic issues and global economic issues rather than what's going to happen with North Korea. I think overall, the domestic consumer confidence, domestic business confidence, the domestic politics, how well they make policy is going to play a lot bigger part than what North Korea is going to do. And what the ECB, Bank of Japan, and US Fed will do with their interest rate and their governments with fiscal policy is going to play a lot more role than what North Korea is going to do.
It's all about surprises when it comes to North Korea. All right, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And that does it for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.